Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Books to Last podcast. This week we are joined by the wonderful Olivia-Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, discussing her list of 5 books she'd take with her to her mystery remote location. I hope you enjoy. Olivia-Savannah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Welcome. How are you doing today? Are you having a good day?
Yeah, it's been a very good day. Nice and sunny, lots of reading, so perfect.
Yeah, perfect, ideal day. What have you been reading at the moment? What are you reading in the sun?
Well, I had a big stack of books that I'm currently reading because, as always, I'm reading more than one book. But the 2 main ones I have going is The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater, which I'll probably talk about more later, and also A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, which I'm not liking too much, but I'm hoping it will change because it's quite a big book and there's lots of room for improvement.
Always good to remain optimistic. And yeah, some books can change around in just a couple chapters. So awesome to see if that will work out. Well, I mean, you've already hinted to one of the lists, so very exciting. So I will, just for the benefit of any listeners who haven't heard before, the podcast is all about the 5 books that our esteemed guest gets to take with them onto their mystery remote location, the 5 books they absolutely love and want to reread and couldn't possibly live without. So before we get into the list itself, whereabouts do you want to be cast away to? Our guest always gets to pick their mystery remote location. And yeah, if you had anywhere in particular in mind.
I think I would want to go for a very obscure island that's somewhere very far away with a warm climate, ideally, plenty of beach space, maybe some mountains. I can't really say a concrete island that exists in the world because I feel like no island is remote enough if it actually exists, but something like that would be perfect.
See, I'm picturing like Ogygia, but like my only knowledge of that is from Percy Jackson. So the version of Ogygia that's in Percy Jackson.
Exactly. That would actually be perfect.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's great. It has like it's magical and tropical and yeah, and also very remote. And you might get visited by Percy Jackson. So really, what is there not to love? Excellent. So we are actually going to an island this time. Very, very nice. What will be the first book that you'll be taking with you to your island?
The first book was fairly easy for me to choose, but I'll be curious to see if you'll let me choose it because it's the complete works of Shakespeare, which has quite a few things in there.
I think I mean, it is published as a book quite a lot, although I mean, might be sneaking it maybe with a secret cover. Why?
I mean, I could narrow it down to one play if you would really want.
If you had to narrow it down to one play, what play would it be, out of curiosity?
I think if I had to choose one right now, I would just choose Hamlet because it's one of the longer plays. So it's got more to it than some of the others. And I do absolutely adore it, even though it's the very stereotypical favorite Shakespeare play to have.
Hamlet is a favorite of previous podcast guests as well. It is one that's very well loved. But Shakespeare, I mean, it's like you said, there's a lot in there, and there's plenty to love. I don't know. I think I've always told people my favorite is Much Ado About Nothing, but I think that's because it's the one that I saw live for the first time. So special memories. What is it about? I mean, what is it about Hamlet in particular that maybe stands out? Is it the length? And just generally, why do you love Shakespeare?
Well, I think if we're going to Hamlet specifically, I'm a big fan of the loyal secondary character who's just always going to be loyal. And Horatio is definitely that to Hamlet. So I think Horatio is definitely my favorite character in the play. But I equally love Hamlet. I like that he is a trickster, that he's smart enough to play around with people. And I think, if I started to go a bit mad on the island, I could relate to some of Hamlet's lines that he has in the play. So I definitely love it for those reasons. But I also always remember the David Tennant adaptation of Hamlet, which I adore. And it's very easy for me to read the play and visualize that in my mind as well. So it'd be like double beneficial to me to take Hamlet with me.
Because of so a previous guest on the podcast also really wanted it, or also really adored Hamlet, and just hearing you talk about it, it's on my, I have read it because I read it in school, which I don't necessarily think is the best way to experience Hamlet, or well, experience any Shakespeare play always, because I think it's you bring different things from it when you read things for fun as opposed for education, although I did, to be fair, love English literature at school. And I think when I revisit it, I'm going to revisit a audiobook version as a sort of audio drama performance. And to be fair, I think when I was looking into them, I wanted to see if there was one, because I knew David Tennant had done a performance of Hamlet. So
yeah.
I mean, speaking about Shakespeare generally, what are some of his other, I suppose, works that you really, really like?
I'm a huge fan of the tragedies, really. I love, as I said, Hamlet, but then Othello is quite high on the list, and Coriolanus as well. Just anything where, loads of people die at the end gets me all the time. King Lear as well is a really good one. But I was surprised when I read the history plays, because I really thought I wasn't going to be a huge fan of the history plays. But then I read, I'm going to get it confused because there's so many King Henrys, but I think King Henry the Fourth, part 1 and 2, where you meet Falstaff.
We really love a Henry, don't we?
Yeah, quite a few of them. And I loved Falstaff's humor. I thought he was great. And his interactions with Hal were fantastic. Again, watching it on stage brought it to life in a way that wasn't the same when I read it originally. So I'd also say history sometimes.
Yeah, I always find it really interesting because I mean, with the tragedies, I mean, they are tragic by definition, but I always found it really interesting reading them because I suppose because they're stage plays, and I guess Shakespeare's personal style, whenever the characters die, they feel the need to announce it to everybody else on the stage and the audience that they have in fact died. And I have a younger brother who's 5, and he is getting a bit of a flair for the dramatic as he gets older, which is really amusing to me personally. And I think he'd sort of fallen over or done something recently, and completely unbeknownst to him, why I found it completely hilarious, but I think he announced to the entire room that he'd perished, and he is in fact just 5. And I remember just like laughing, and his mum was asking why it was quite as funny as I was like, it just sounds like he's in a Shakespeare play and he's too young to know that.
He's born to play the role.
Yeah, I think he needs to start going to drama classes as soon as he's old enough. Yeah, so I mean, Shakespeare, you can't really go wrong. He is as famous as he is for a reason. I need to expand my Shakespeare reading because it's fairly limited to sort of a handful of plays. Othello is one that has been on my list for a while. My good friend studied it at school, and even she actually really enjoyed it, and she's not massively into that genre necessarily, but she really enjoyed studying that one. So yeah, always a really interesting one. And you've got Macbeth and other sort of classics. So again, I feel like I need to revisit them, not in a classroom.
Yeah, I really want to try listening to an audiobook of one of them at some point, because I've never tried it in that media, but it's somewhere in between the intention of, okay, it's written and it's not meant to be read, but it's not quite seen as it is on stage. So it's that in between phase, and I'd be very interested to see how that turns out.
Yeah, I've been looking for like sort of, I suppose, BBC production ones in particular, because I remember Hamlet, the one that I found, does have Ian McKellen in it, and realistically I'll download any audiobook that has Ian McKellen in it. But I do find it really interesting to see sort of different actors, and also it gives you the different voices, because I am not an actor and I'm not able to give different voices to characters in my own head when I'm reading them. So it helps sort of, I suppose, separate and follow the story a little bit more, which is really cool. Well, I mean, really strong start to the list, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else is going to join your complete works of Shakespeare that may be disguised as a very lengthy copy of Hamlet?
Well, I think next I'm gonna flip the game up very far from Shakespeare, and I would have to take Twilight by Stephanie Meyer with me.
That is I mean, if that is 100, that is 180 definitely. Why? Oh, so why Twilight? Are we again widely loved by a very different group of people, maybe more people in common than we think, but why Twilight in particular?
Twilight is very much a comfort read for me. I read it first when I was 12, and I've reread it countless times since. I'm actually currently rereading it right now in Dutch, and I just know it like the back of my hand. So I think if ever I got homesick or missing civilization, I could reread Twilight and it would just throw me right back. And I love the fandom. There are memes that are constantly going on around Twilight, and when I read the books, I can just imagine all of these memes and have a good like mental laugh in my mind.
I experienced Twilight at a similar age, where I was quite young, and I believe my nan bought me the series from a Scholastic book fair. And I had come across Twilight in the form of the movies because my mum had bought the DVDs, and I think I watched the first three because all three movies had been out. I remember watching it, and then I think I just read the last book because I was yet to be aware of the fact that books and films are vastly different to each other, even when they've got the same title. So I ended up reading the last one because I really wanted to know what happened. And then, I mean, the vibe of the book is just so different from the vibe of the film, just in terms of, as it always is. So I then end up going back and rereading it from the beginning. And it is a very different experience to the films. But yes, I have seen the memes. The memes are very funny. It's a meme-worthy series.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's definitely not perfect, but it's just, I don't know, it's iconic regardless of its imperfections. And I find it very enjoyable.
It's definitely, I mean, it is unique in its interpretation of the myth of vampire, which is something that is, I think, difficult to achieve considering how long that myth has existed. But it stands alone. And in that regard, I suppose, and then there's a lot of series that have tried to, I suppose, mimic what Twilight did, and I suppose not quite achieved it. Twilight as a story has been republished multiple times with different takes. Have you read any of the sort of rewritten versions of it? So, I mean, I know she did Life and Death, which I haven't read, and Midnight Sun, which I have.
I'm just the same as you. I haven't read Life and Death, but actually my Dutch copy, if you flip it, it's got Life and Death in Dutch. So that's what I'm working up to next. But I have read Midnight Sun, and I did not like that book whatsoever. I couldn't stand it from that perspective. And Edward is just not a character whose mind I want to be in. And there was not enough extra things in there for me to appreciate having the whole book again. Like, I enjoyed every extra scene, every Cullen family scene that we don't get to see, but any of the romantic stuff, I was like, I've had this before and I had it better before. So yeah.
See, that's so, I mean, I definitely, so Midnight Sun is considerably larger than Twilight, because Edward is wordy, like he is wordy in his own mind. It's not even the extra scenes that make it longer, it's him thinking. And
just him.
It's just him on his own thinking, and then also thinking about what other people are thinking. But I found it interesting because when I first read the whole Twilight series, I intensely disliked Edward as a character. He was not like, I just didn't enjoy him necessarily as much as I enjoyed other characters in the series. And I couldn't put a figure on why. I found out later on from reading other books where I had a similar feeling about male characters, is it had a little bit to do with how Bella perceived him as a character, because I read other series that were written from, I suppose, two perspectives, and I had the same feeling, but when reading from their own perspective, it didn't stay the same. So I read like those 13 chapters that got leaked of Midnight Sun years and years ago when they got leaked. And my feelings towards Edward, I mean, even though he's still not my favorite, I still don't love him. I like him more having the sympathy of knowing his perspective, but at the same time, I mean, Midnight Sun was kind of I suppose, a guilty pleasure read in that I kind of knew I wasn't gonna. I suppose I just wanted to experience Twilight again. I suppose I probably should have just read Twilight. But I was camping at the time, and we were camping in like woods and fields and all that sort of thing. And it was just giving me massive Twilight vibes. So I decided to just revisit Forks. And I think more than anything from that series, from that book, I wanted to learn more about Rosalie, because Rosalie is it's like my favorite Cullen. And I wanted more about her, and I was upset that Stephanie Meyer continued her disservice of Rosalie, who has so much potential to be such an amazingly interesting character, and I just feel like she doesn't get the pages that she deserves.
I actually very much agree. I wouldn't say I like Rosalie, because I think that's hard to do, but I really believe there's more depth to her than what we got to see in the original Twilight series. I mean, I feel like there's a lot more to her personality. Like, selfish can't be your only personality trait. And even if it is, she does selfish with a level of finesse that there is so much more to it. So I was like, I was going to get more in Midnight Sun, but I didn't. I wanted more her. I wanted more Emmett. We did get more Jasper, but I could have done with even more, to be honest. There was a lot that I really wanted.
Yeah. They're like Rosalie and Emmett's relationship, just like her as a character and them together, it's just so intriguing to me because they're so different, so fundamentally different as people. Like, Emmett is like innately likable. His main personality trait is that he's likable, and and hers is that she's not. And I just find it like really strange. Like, I just want more information for them. And I mean, we get sort of tiny peaks and flashes of depths of like how much she wants to be a mother, or the loss that she feels from the loss of her human life and all of that sort of thing. But like, it always seems to revert to this place of like selfishness and vanity. And it's like, no, I disagree, because I think even if she was, I suppose, vain and selfish in her human life, and those were things that she brought with her to being a vampire, I just think after everything she went through, and after the life that she's had, and the journey she's been on, there is just so much more to it. And I just think that there could have been, I suppose, a lot more digging into it. It's Twilight very much is one of those things. I probably reread it recently as well, and it's just it encapsulates that feeling. I just like 90s high school TV shows, but like America. It's just that feeling. The feeling I get when I watch Buffy and Smallville is the feeling that I get when I read Twilight.
Yeah. I definitely understand that. And I also am a big fan of vampires, so that definitely feeds into why I like Twilight so much. And I mean, I like some of the classic vampires like Dracula and what have you, but I also think she did something that was so different with vampires that I had to admire it, because I've seen several takes on vampires, and some of them are less creatively challenging than I would like. Like, of course, there's been some that have done amazing creative things that are not Twilight too, but she was one of the first ones I saw really doing something very different with the mythology.
Yeah, I've seen another series that it's definitely going for the same aesthetic as Twilight, and a lot of people say it's quite similar to Twilight, although I've not read it myself. I think it's called Crave, but I'm not entirely sure.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose, some more recent vampire. But I mean, Twilight was probably the last vampire book I read, because I think I kind of read it and then I went a few years where I was just sort of reading, I think, Greek mythology inspired fantasy, and then I went into just a regular fantasy phase. And then I recently read The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, and that kind of, I suppose, revived my enjoyment of vampire stories and that sort of thing. And I really enjoy that series, and I can't wait for the next one to come out. Strangely enough, even reading that, even though it's a completely different setting, it's completely different characters, I don't think that any of the lead characters that I suppose fulfill the roles of Bella, Jacob, and Edward are anything like Bella, and Jacob, and Edward. But it kind of felt like finding a different Twilight.
Yes.
Which was one of the reasons why I think I loved it so much. So yeah, a very I suppose iconic choice, iconic in completely different ways to Shakespeare, but still iconic. um, great. So I mean, what is the third book that will be reading that will be joining your island?
I think I'm going to take Ariel by Sylvia Plath, which is a poetry collection. And I've reread it twice in its entirety now. And I usually reread it when I'm sad. So it's definitely a very emotionally picked up book of mine. And it's got a lot of my favorite Plath poems in it. And every time I read it, I annotate it with my thoughts and feelings, like at the time or what I think of the poetry. So when I reread it again, I've got the poem, my annotations, and then I start annotating with my current feelings. So it's very personal. I have to take that actual copy of my own with me. But yeah, I would choose that poetry collection.
See, I feel like I need to get into some more poetry, and that might be one to sort of try, because I still have, so when I studied English literature at GCSE, I had a poetry anthology that they gave us in sort of A4. It's a school textbook type one, but we annotated it all through, and then I think I continued to annotate it even though we'd finished studying the poems afterwards. And they're not ones that I've revisited since. I think I probably should. It's on my shelf. I think I might do that. But poetry's so interesting because I suppose it's one of those things that, I mean, not, I think there's people who read poetry and then there's a lot of people who just, I suppose, don't know where to start. What is it, I suppose, about this anthology that is it that emotional connection that with the revisiting and annotation that brings you back to that one?
I think because it's such a emotionally raw collection. Sylvia Plath is just so honest in her poetry without it being obvious that it's honest. There's always the question of, should you separate the poet from what she's writing about? And while you can read like life markers in her poetry, it's also distant enough that you can just get lost in the emotions. And I also particularly love her use of imagery. I just think it's mind-blowingly fantastic. Some of the images that she can carry through her poems and the comparisons she can make. And they always just blow my mind. And it's written so beautifully. I'm in awe of her writing.
This might be a difficult one, do you have a particular favorite poem from the book?
That is a difficult one. I would say at the moment it's definitely Tulips. I really like that one, and I think it's such a good depiction of the beauty in life and how beauty in life is observed, but also how beauty in life can be quite fleeting. And then you've got, of course, the author's maybe personal connection to the poetry about being looked after because of medical reasons and then feeling like under watch all the time. So I feel like you can definitely read it in more than one way. But yeah, again, another fantastic poem.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, poetry's like even more so than I suppose literary fiction. I always found it fascinating how you could take literally a single word or a single line, maybe containing 3 words, and you can sort of extract 3 pages worth of meaning that could possibly be coming from just those few words. And that sounds like a really wonderful anthology. I can't say I've ever read any Sylvia Plath. Is there any other works in particular that you've read of hers that you enjoy? I think I have The Bell Jar on my shelf waiting for me to read it, along with all of the other books that are waiting for me to read it.
I've been meaning to read The Bell Jar. I keep getting scared because it's her fiction work rather than poetry. And I don't want to, I don't know, tarnish my opinion of her poetry by really not liking her fiction work. So my sister has it on her shelf and I've always seen it there, like, oh, I should really try it. But then I always pick up something else as well. So I should probably just pick it up and read it, but I'm so anxious about it.
I mean, it's so strange with The Bell Jar because I think that's the only, I don't think, I can guarantee it's the only Sylvia Plath book that my husband is familiar with. And it's not because it's read it, it's because it's featured in 10 Things I Hate About You. So
yeah.
a wildly famous retelling of a Shakespeare play, of course, because so many films. I only recently, sorry, I only recently found out how many sort of quite famous 90s and noughties movies are retelling of Shakespeare plays. I had no
there's
idea.
quite a few of them. I love them as well.
Yeah, I had no idea Clueless was no, it's not Shakespeare, but Clueless is a retelling of like Emma by Jane Austen as well. And I remember my mind just being blown after I heard that, because I've seen that and I've read Emma. And then, yes, I was thinking back to it, I was like, oh my God, it actually is.
Yeah, when you connect all those lines and you're like, oh my goodness, how did I miss this before?
Yeah. And I remember, I think my English teacher single-handedly blew my mind for an entire lesson when they told me the Lion King is Hamlet. And I was like, oh my God, the Lion King is Hamlet. But anyway, sorry, Sylvia Plath. So I mean, to be fair, yeah, The Bell Jar's one of those. It's one of those. It's like iconic works that I've wanted to read for ages, and it's also quite slim. It's a slim novel. It's not very big, and I keep thinking I haven't really gotten a good excuse for why I shouldn't be reading, why I shouldn't have read that. But there's plenty of time, I suppose.
We've got time. Books don't expire. They wait for us.
Exactly. It's there waiting for me whenever I'm ready. So we've got plays, we have a fiction novel, and we have poetry. What else is going to be joining these three, I suppose, pieces of art on your on your bookshelf? Just because it's always interesting when the lists cross mediums and genres and that sort of thing, because I think it just shows how all different stories can really, I don't know, massively impact the same person, even though they're nothing alike.
I think I'm going to do the same thing with my next one, because I'm going to choose the Bible for my next book, which it has religious. Oh, sorry. I
was going to say it's widely referred to as the greatest book ever written, and also I think it's the highest selling book ever written. Like, yeah, most copies sold across the world.
Yeah, it's quite a big one, but it's the only one on my list that I haven't read all the way through. So I was thinking, I've got all this time on my island, I could finally read all the way through from start to finish, and it's got religious value for me as a Christian, and I think it has wisdom moments in it, lots of verses that mean a lot to me and I try and live by as well. But I was also thinking, if it ever got cold, I mean, there are some pages that I don't think we need, that I wouldn't mind using as kindling. I'm pretty sure there's a whole chapter where it's like, this person gave birth to this person and this person gave birth to this person, and I can pass on those sections.
I think if you'd have given me a million chances to guess reasons why you might have taken that with you, that wouldn't have been, it definitely wouldn't have made it on that list. That's really funny. Well, I know there's been a lot of, I suppose, I don't know if that's what the right word, there was a lot of versions of the Bible. I mean, is it the King James version? That's the one that's jumping to mind. Is there a specific one that you would want, or
Yeah, definitely. I would probably take the New International version, which is the version I own at the moment. I got a Bible when I was 9 for Christmas, I think I asked for it, and that's the version I have. And I find it a good version because when you're 9, you want a version that you can understand. King James is a bit hard to understand, so I find it quite understandable, and kind of like with Ariel by Sylvia Plath, I have my favorite verses highlighted and notes taken and things like that.
It's definitely, I suppose it would be also quite a personal and important thing to have with you when, I suppose, if you've only got access to 5 books, it would be quite important to have that there. I mean, and also, yeah, like you said, it's got a lot of different stories in it. I mean, I can't say I'm particularly familiar because I went to Church of England primary school where we were taught quite a bit there, but it's not something that, because I suppose me personally and my family, it's not something that I have revisited since. But it's one of those, I have wanted to, I suppose, reread well, I say reread, to read the Bible, maybe not cover to cover, but read more of it, and I suppose other religious texts, because I do find it fascinating, and there's so many, like say, there's lots of teaching and learning in there that I think it's beneficial for anyone really, because I think you bring your own interpretation and thoughts to it, which would be it would be interesting. I would be interested to see what my reading of it would be, which would be very, very good. Yes. Sorry,
like
deep in thought.
I feel like when it comes to religious texts and trying them out, I always recommend just, I don't know, trying to find verses online rather than diving into the whole thing, because it can be so hard to know where to start. And even though the Bible means a lot to me personally, I've also read online, Pinterest is fantastic for this, just like Chinese Psalms or something, or just little quotes from different religious books that can still stick with you and strike with you, regardless of whether you're religious or not. So I've got quite a few of those that I just really appreciate, even though they're maybe not from the Bible. And then I've got the Bible ones I appreciate as well.
Excellent. So, I mean, we've got, like you say, very varied and diverse first four choices. What would be the, I suppose, fifth and final choice that would be joining your eclectic range of works?
I think my final choice is my hardest one. And I think for now, I'm going to say The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater, which is the fourth and final book in the Raven cycle, which is a series that has just become my personality trait because I love it so much. And I am rereading it for the first time. I usually just read fanfic of it, but now that I'm reading it again, I'm realizing I truly love the actual books. And originally the third one was my favorite, which is why I was like, I'm not sure if I would choose the third one or the last one. But right now I'm rereading the last one and I'm absolutely in love with it once again.
I mean, a fourth and final installment, that's I mean, it's usually where all the action is. So Maggie Stiefvater, sorry, I would never, it's one of those, I've only, so many authors whose names I've only ever seen written down, I've never heard them spoken out loud.
That is fair.
I feel like she had another series out that wasn't the Raven Cycle when I was at school, and I had some friends who were reading it. I can't say I've ever read anything that she's written. Out of curiosity, what is the Raven Cycle about, if you were going to give your pitch to get somebody to read the Raven Cycle?
Well, now where do I start? The back of the book will tell you it's about Blue, who knows that when she kisses her true love, he will die. However, I feel like it's actually about these boys and this girl who go on a quest to find a historically dead king who, if you find him, will grant you one wish. And I would say that's what it's really about. And the synopsis is a bit misleading, but yeah.
A wish granting king. So does the quest span all four books, or do you get, I suppose, areas of, I suppose, closure at the end of all four?
I think it does span all four books, but you get enough closure towards each ending, like steps along the journey. But it's very much magical realism, I would say. And it has a plot, I promise it has a plot, but it's also very character driven because the characters develop a lot across the series. It's a very found family.
Oh, found family. See, now that's a good trope. I tend to find that I can be incredibly lax and forgiving with books that have little to no plot if I love the characters.
Yes,
or if the plot is incredibly, I suppose, cliche, as in that I just know what's going to happen. I don't mind if I love the characters. I'm all about my character driven stories and character development. It's probably one of the reasons why I read a lot of YA, and provided the characters are what I want them to be, it doesn't really matter that all of the stories, a lot of the stories are quite similar to each other. I can usually manage. So yeah, we like a character driven plot with a character driven story with some fairly decent plots.
Yes, exactly.
And found family trope, which is really interesting. And also, I mean, is Blue the main female character of the story?
She's the main female character of the story, but I would say that there's 4 characters who have equal perspective. So it's not first person, it's third person, changing point of view with every chapter.
Right. And I can't really ask you that because that would be a spoiler. Sorry, I was quite your mention of what they said on sort of the back of the book of whether when they kiss their true love they'll die. I mean, that is not a nice one, because if they die, you know, they were your true love and now they're dead, and if they don't die, it means they're not your true love, and that's just exactly. I mean, it sucks all around. That's really bad. And I can't ask if they find their true love. So okay, now yeah, I'm intrigued. And also it spawned fan fiction, which actually I have had the query recently about whether fan fiction can be included in lists for being cast away. I definitely think that there should be an area of Goodreads or whichever reading tracker you use that allows you to count fan fiction as books read, because they are long and they are often actually quite well written and sometimes not as well. So there's like a good mix, but I mean, real books are like that as well. There's an exception to be made.
That's true.
Is there, I mean, I say there's someone listening to the podcast who is a huge fan of the Raven cycle themselves, but they've not read any of the fan fiction. Is there one that springs to mind that you think you'd recommend?
I can't even answer this. Do you know how many favorite fan fictions I have? I've actually been thinking of, you know, when my next birthday comes around next year, having a very self-indulgent video, which will be incredibly niche, where I recommend my favorite Raven Cycle fanfics.
It is your birthday and you can celebrate it however you want.
But I can't think of one, and I read all my fanfics around a certain character as well, so I feel like it's just my favorite character, and I just hone in.
Niche.
Sorry about that.
Oh no, don't worry about it. Yeah, so I mean, fan fiction is a weird one because I read fan fiction when I was younger, but it's not something I've reread in ages, although I have been tempted. And I think the only book I've ever read fan fiction about is, well, no, 2. I feel like I probably read some Harry Potter, likely around the Marauders, because I was obsessed with them 4 as a friendship group. But more than that was The Host by Stephanie Meyer. I read a lot of fan fiction around The Host by Stephanie Meyer, and I have no idea why. I think it's because there was never a sequel, so I wanted to see some perspectives on what happened.
When she was announcing Midnight Sun, I actually really wanted it to be the sequel to The Host. That was what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I had the same. I mean, there was a lot of people on Twitter who sort of felt that way. I remember reading it. I was like, yeah, you know what? A sequel to The Host would have been so much better.
Yeah.
I want to know what's happening with them.
Yeah.
But maybe during the next time we're all locked in the house. I'm not wishing for another pandemic. Just maybe we all go into the house for an internationally declared holiday. You know, the world says, you guys have had a tough couple of years. You guys can just be off work for a few months and we'll pay you. Maybe we'll get some more authors do that. I do think it was interesting, I suppose, a couple months in to that happening. A lot of authors did actually release secret projects that nobody had heard of up until that point. Which was an interesting one. And I was kind of impressed by actually getting the releases out there, because so many books that I'd been waiting for months and months for obviously had their release dates pushed back. I'm still waiting for The Heart Principle by Helen. What, it's been a year. It should have been out by now. Well, so The Raven King in particular, I mean, is it because you're recently rereading it and you just think that's the favorite one? Because I mean, usually in a series, the first one is the favorite one, it's because it starts it all.
I think with the Raven cycle, actually, you get a lot of different favorites because different books hone in on different characters, if that makes sense. And the third book is mostly about my favorite character, but in the fourth book, trying to avoid spoilers. In the fourth, I don't know. I could even say. In the fourth book, a lot comes together that is really nice to see come together. I think this book is the definition of bittersweet. It's got a lot of happy moments that, characters deserve. It's about time, but there's an equal amount of sadness and suspense where you just feel incredibly sad as well.
Yeah.
And it mixes both of those feelings very well. So, yeah.
From a book lover's perspective, I appreciate how much you're able to convey with absolutely no spoilers. It's really, really impressive. It's one of the things that I really love about your YouTube channel, actually, because you manage to convey all the important parts about a book without actually giving any spoilers, but people feel like they know that they need to read it.
Thank you. It's mostly because I want to yell at everyone to read my favorite things, but I don't want to ruin anyone's experience at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose I'm quite fortunate that spoilers have never been a huge bother for me. I mean, I might have had some exceptions, but I kind of I'm so late to the party with so many book series that within reason, as long as the entire story hasn't been told to me, and also I like the outcome, I can probably still read to the end of a series even if I know what's going to happen because it's been spoiled, or if I accidentally spoil myself. I do that all the time. Especially with competition shows and that sort of thing, because I cannot seem to remember not to go on Twitter before I watch the new episode of RuPaul's Drag Race. I seem physically incapable of remembering to do that. But I know it's important to a lot of people. So thank you. And I mean, the Raven Cycle sounds, I feel like I've got pictures of front covers of those books because
I have the first one.
Yes,
viewers can't see that, but it looks beautiful. Viewers, buy this book, it's beautiful.
Yes, it is for the benefit of viewers. It's very, very nice set of, and it looks like they all match, which is good as well, because we don't like it when people change cover styles halfway through a book series. It's irritating. Or maybe not. So to me in particular, I like everything to match. So I don't like it when I have to then go back and rebuy earlier book series because I need them to match. Okay, so for the benefit of that, before we get into your honorable mentions, because I know you did say that the last one was quite difficult, so I feel like I might know some of the honorable mentions that might be on there. What are the 5 books that you are taking with you to your tropical island, possibly Ojigia?
I'm taking Hamlet, which looks suspiciously large, Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, Ariel by Sylvia Plath, The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater, and the Bible, no author there.
Well, like we say, very difficult choices, and I know you had some difficulty narrowing it down. What were some honorable mentions that nearly made it to the list but didn't quite get there, or you might be trying to sneak in with you in the carved out part of the empty pages at the back of Shakespeare?
Well, I'd probably be taking rest of series. So if I mention the Raven Cycle, I'll just take the whole thing or the whole Twilight series. But I was also considering taking the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin because I'm reading it at the moment and I love it. And if I had to leave for my island right now, without knowing the ending, I might just scream or something. Have to take it with me. Should I list them all? Just go all the way through?
I mean, all of them in however much detail you want to give about each of them. I mean, N.K. Jemisin, I know, has got a lot of really good books out that definitely an author that I need to go check out. I've had The City We Became on my TBR forever.
But yeah, the 5th season, it's very good. It's quite Afrofuturist, and I would struggle to describe it because the plot is quite layered, but very good world building. If you like fantasy, I definitely recommend it. Don't worry if you get confused by the prologue. Everyone absolutely does, but it gets easy to understand. I would also bring The Summer That Melted Everything by Tiffany McDaniel, which is a historical fiction literary kind of book about this preacher who writes in the newspaper that he wants the devil to come and meet him because he would like to talk to the devil and see what the devil is like. And the devil shows up one day in the form of a young child and he's like, hey, I'm the devil. And it becomes a big question of is the boy the devil, or are what people do more so an embodiment of the devil than the boy himself? And it was very layered and very well done. And you literally sweat reading the book because the descriptions of the summer are so sweltering and vivid that you can't help but feel it too. Yeah, I think those are the extra ones I'd bring with me.
Well, I mean, that sounds really interesting. That takes sort of professional curiosity to a whole new level.
Yes.
But it sounds like two additional really interesting ones. I think we'd let you finish your current reads before we take you to your island. That would just be cruel. Well, thank you so much for sharing your list with us. It was, yeah, and literally an iconic list. I feel like that is the word that's jumping into my mind when I'm looking at all of it sort of in front of me. If our readers wanted to check out more of your excellent book recommendations that are blissfully spoiler free, where might they find you to do that?
They can find me on YouTube and Instagram, or on my blog, all of them under the name Olivia's Catastrophe. And then I'm also on Twitter under Olivia's Catastro, because Olivia's Catastrophe doesn't fit in the bar.
I had a similar issue. That's why if listeners want to find the podcast on socials, we're at Books4Last because podcast doesn't fit on Twitter. Thank you, Twitter. You decide to get very strict with your characters in the name but nowhere else. But yeah, I wanted to tell you about this. I did a couple of hints on our Twitter account for the next few guests that we'd have on the podcast, and I was incredibly proud of the one that I came up for yours.
Oh, what was it?
So it was an olive emoji, it was 2 ears, and then it had a cat and a trophy, and I was really, really proud of myself for a whole day.
Oh, I get it. It took me a while.
I was embarrassingly proud of myself for an entire day for coming up with that.
No, I really like it. I think that's a great hit. Oh,
okay.
Wow.
So sorry, just wanted to share that as a little extra on the end of that. So yes, definitely go check out Olivia-Savannah's channel. It's a great one. I really enjoy it personally. Also, her Instagram. You give me productivity and motivation every time I see all of your sort of was to-do lists, and now they call them to-da lists on one of the podcasts that I listen to, because instead of things that you have to do, it's ta-da, it's done.
I like that.
Which they always make me feel motivated to get things done in the day. So yes, definitely go and check out all of the socials and YouTube for Olivia-Savannah. Thank you very much, listeners, for listening. Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was so much fun. And
thank you for having me.
Until next time, bye for now.